Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Today is Monday, December 30th, 2024. It's Luther Wilson III here, representing for Upside Property Services. As some of you know, I'm a real estate professional here in the Kansas City market, working with investors, investing in real estate, doing lending as well. Okay, part of my specialty is creative financing, seller finance transactions. And in today's session, I want to take a deeper dive into our big gun, contract for deeds. That's the number one way that me and my team have been doing seller finance transactions for years now. And I did a video a couple weeks ago where I talked a bit about the documents and the forms that we use, how to structure a contract for deed, or at least how we do it. Okay, and so you can review these videos and, based on your operation, where you invest, what part of the country, or maybe if you're in another country, how you might be able to do a similar type of thing, because we've seen so much success with seller financing, creative financing, and so forth. So part of what I want to do is share that with some people. And so on that video I did a couple weeks ago, I listed off all of the documents or forms that we use for our contract for deeds. And FYI, we're in Kansas City. So for us, we do business in Kansas and Missouri. There are some differences. So again, based on where you're located or where you're investing, you're gonna have to look into that, all right? And by the way, there's a number of ways to do seller financing. There's different types of seller finance transactions. Contract for deeds, which is also referred to as installment agreements. In some parts of the world, it's also known as agreements for sale. It just happens to be one that is, reliable for us here in Kansas City. A lot of our residents or buyers have been okay with it, okay? And, based on the rules and regulations and laws, it's been very favorable for us. And so again, you're gonna have to determine, based on where you're located and how you operate, looking at how you can do things. So in today's session, I'm gonna talk about, of course, contract for deeds, and this will be a series. I don't know how many episodes there'll be, but it'll be a series based on contract for deeds because that's our main thing. And in today's session, I wanna go over the first three documents that we use for our contract for deeds. And then in subsequent videos, I'll go through the next three and then the next three. And then from there, I'll probably get into some more examples of how we've been able to do it and some things to look out for. Okay, so the first three forms that we use in our package is the contract for deed itself, okay? The second one is a seller financing disclosure, okay? And the third one is an as-is addendum, okay? So if you're familiar with seller financing, if you're familiar with mortgages, or if you're familiar with private lending, when you're doing seller financing or contract for deeds, you're essentially combining those together a certain type of way. And, I gotta talk about at least the different forms of seller financing before I get into the first three documents on the contract for deeds. So seller financing in general, okay, for a lot of investors, all right, for a lot of property owners, mostly investors. Let's stick there because I'm an investor. I'm a real estate broker. My background is in property management, doing renovations, project management, and so forth. And so for me and my clients, when we think of seller finance transactions, the number one thing that most investors think of is subject to the existing financing. Okay, that's one form of seller financing. Another form, of course, is the contract for deed, which I'll continue to get into. Another is a wraparound mortgage, okay? And another is a true seller carryback, all right? And then also you have lease options, lease purchases, or rent to owns, which could or are considered seller financing as well. All right. So again, based on how you're doing business, the rules and regulations in that, county or part of the country, you can tweak this and determine what can work well for you. And it also kind of depends, like if you're going to be acquiring the property, or if you're going to be selling it using seller financing. All right. So back to the contract for deeds. The contract for deed is the very first form that we use. And I brought a sample of a recent one that I did with me so I can make sure that I stay on track here. I'm looking at it, the contract for deed itself is 2 pages long. All right, so when you're talking seller financing, when you're talking mortgages, when you're talking private loans, and actually my last video that I did last week, I talked about private lending. And again, it ties in together. So the contract for deed is basically a private mortgage, okay? So on a traditional mortgage, you're gonna have either a promissory note and a deed of trust, or you're gonna have a promissory note and a mortgage. Well, in the contract for deed, because it's set up a different way, and one of the biggest distinguishing factors between the contract for deed and a traditional mortgage is that the title does not transfer. So the deed will remain in the seller's name for the foreseeable future, essentially until the buyer pays off the loan, however that looks, okay? So that's the number one distinguishing factor. So the contract for deed documents, as opposed to the note and mortgage or the note and the deed of trust, okay? In the contract for deed, it's gonna have similar clauses and paragraphs and disclosures, right? On our contract for deed, there's 12 different paragraphs that breaks it down. And so in those 12 paragraphs, you're gonna see similar wording as you would see in a promissory note and the mortgage, or the promissory note and the deed of trust, okay? And in this forms, the contract for deed, of course, it's gonna mention the buyer, the seller, the property, okay? And then it's gonna have the terms and conditions, the price, okay? What the monthly payment is going to be, if there's principal and interest, if there's interest, right? It's gonna have P&I for principal and interest, and then it's gonna have another breakdown for the escrow, for the taxes and insurance, okay? And then it's gonna go through the remaining things, the main things, right? And in some mortgages, in some loans, you might see a mortgage or a deed of trust that's 80 to 100 pages long, but we've been able to narrow it down to make it a lot more efficient and straightforward, okay? And so that's the contract for deed. It's basically a private note. It's a private note or a private mortgage that gets created, all right? So contract for deed versus a note and mortgage, or a note and deed of trust. Okay, so the second form that we use is the seller finance disclosure. And on this disclosure, it makes it clear as day how much the buyer's total monthly payment is going to be, okay? And it also breaks down what the interest payment is going to be, all right? Each and every month, right? It's got a breakdown for the taxes and insurance each year, okay? Broken down into each month for the escrow. And then it also discloses the total amount of interest that would be paid, okay? For a lot of ours, we're doing 30-year, fully amortized, fixed interest rate contract for deeds with no balloons and no prepayment penalties. So it's very clean, it's very straightforward, and it helps so that the buyers are comfortable putting 10, 20, 30% down. That's another key part why, I'm pushing this a lot more, because the results that we've seen from this is amazing, because we're able to get large down payments and we get buyers who are comfortable doing that because we're making it so clean and so fair and so straightforward. Okay. So on the second form that we use on the contract for deeds, the financing disclosure will break down even the total amount that'll be paid if that buyer is to make each payment as agreed without paying it off early necessarily, or without paying extra towards the principal during that full 30 years, let's say. Some of them could be 10 to 15 years. A lot of ours are 20 to 30 years. So we lay it out there. So it's a very big number, right? So we break that down, right? When we meet with our buyers and we have the amortization schedule on the financing disclosure, it also says we have received an amortization schedule from the seller. It also says we also understand completely the terms stated on this addendum, and it also states we are buying the property in as-is condition. All right, which leads me to the next point, the next document, as-is condition statement attached. Okay, so the next form is the as-is condition addendum. Okay, so when we are selling properties through the contract for deed, we are selling these as is. Okay, so a lot of times the buyer will come in and they may have an agent or an assistant or someone helping them through the process, and we give them ample opportunity to view the property, to walk the property. If they want to bring a contractor in, if they want to bring an inspector in, they can do it. And we make it very clear, like, hey, if we've had an appraisal, if we've had an inspection, if they want to see all that, like I'm, try to be an open book on almost everything that I do, because I want our buyers and the people that we work with to, again, feel comfortable going through this process, and they are. And so they understand. And in this as-is condition addendum, it states that they're buying it as is. They've had an opportunity to do due diligence, and then going forward, it's up to them to maintain the property. So the upkeep, the maintenance, and so forth. And they understand, okay, that, let me just read part of it, right? So you all get a better idea. On the second paragraph, we fully understand this and will take full responsibility of the property in its present condition. We will make the needed repairs when they arise, and when they do arise, we will not harass, bring suit, or any way complain to, withhold payments of, and etc. from seller during the entire course of our agreements. Okay. In the third paragraph, we understand that in the event that we decide not to complete the purchase of the property, or walking away, meaning like walk away from the property, we will automatically forfeit all monies, improvements paid towards and invested in the property unless we sell the property for at least the balance owing on our contract. Okay, so that's the basics of the as-is condition addendum. That's the third form. Okay, so again, I'm going to do a series on this on the next video, in which I talk about contract for deeds. I'm going to go over the next 3 documents, right? But I want to, dig in and kind of overview some things while we're here. Okay, I talked about the contract for deed forms. I talked about the financing disclosure, and I talked about the as-is condition addendum. And there's a number of reasons why we do this here in the Kansas City market. We've had a ton of success with this over the last, me over the last decade, my mentors over the last 2-3 decades. And because we're transparent, and because we disclose, and because we give the purchasers an opportunity to buy a home, and it really gives the buyers a lot of power, because not only are they able to purchase this home, and I emphasize home because, we got to understand the mindset of a purchaser, and that is going to help you to see why we've had so much success with it. Because it's one thing when we're just selling it to an investor, right? Or if we're just renting a property. It's not the same psychology, it's not the same mindset. Because of all the things that I mentioned before, because we're creating such an amazing opportunity, our success rate is like ridiculously good. The defaults are super low. And again, like, this is their home. So these buyers go in knowing that, hey, like, it's not just a house, it's not just an investment, it's not just a piece of property. We have this amazing opportunity and this is our home, right? Eventually we can pay it off and own it free and clear. We, as the sellers, we give them an opportunity if they want to refinance in the future, if they want to move out and rent the house out to someone else, if they want to move and have someone step in where they left off, they can, you know, if they want to collect a down payment, they can sell the house subject to the contract for deed, okay? So it gives these homeowners a lot of power and a lot of freedom to be able to capitalize on this homeownership opportunity. So tap in with me if you have any questions or concerns. Do your own research, do some homework. Okay, so for those investors or lenders or people interested in buying creatively or through some type of seller financing, dig in there a little bit. You or someone who's assisting you or representing you or working with you, if it's a partner or whoever, needs to have a general understanding of how this works. So whoever you're working with, you know, you're talking, you know, mortgages, you're talking real property, you know, you're talking creative financing, and you're talking basically private loans all in one. Seller financing is basically private lending, okay, in a way. So having a general understanding of that, working with people who have done it and are currently, or maybe, you know, doing it or have done it a lot in that market, wherever the property is, it's going to help you tremendously. And again, I talk about real estate every single day, okay? You know, part of my mission or purpose for doing these videos is to educate, inspire, and to collaborate. So feel free to reach out. I'm happy to get you plugged in with partners of mine, past and current clients. I know a lot of investors in the Kansas City market who have been doing a lot more seller finance transactions over the last few years. And it's really been amazing to see it grow because it's a win-win, not just for the investor or the seller, but the homeowner as well. And especially now, I don't know, I think I mentioned we're in fourth quarter. It's, you know, we got a couple more days left to 2024. We've been going through a lot of challenges and changes in the economy with interest rates and so forth going on. So as things progress, just keep this in mind, because there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about real estate investing in general, and especially when it comes to the seller financing and the creative financing. So part of what I want to do is get more people aware of, like, hey, this is a thing. It's happening every single day across the globe, and we're here in Kansas City making it happen. So if you, again, want to buy or sell or invest or place capital, plug in with this. It's Luther Wilson III, Upside Property Services, signing off. Have a blessed day.